My mother-in-law told me that anyone who doesn't help with housework isn't welcome here. She seemed to expect me to feel sorry and beg for forgiveness. My husband, sitting beside her, had a smirk on his face, like he was enjoying watching me get scolded. But instead of feeling upset, I surprisingly felt calm. "I'll leave then," I said firmly, without any doubt. "I won't worry about what happens to them anymore." In that moment, I realized they should regret their own behavior. I'm Susan, 42 years old. I work full-time and take care of our home. My husband John and I have 2 grown-up kids who have moved out and are living their own lives. John and I were supposed to be enjoying our time together, but now we're living with my mother-in-law. After our kids moved out, my mother-in-law, who lost her husband, came to live with us. Our peaceful life with my husband changed a lot because of her presence. My job keeps me busy, and I often work late, sometimes not getting home until after 8 p.m. Lately, when I come back, I'm frustrated by what I see. The living room is a mess, with snacks and clothes scattered around, and my husband is lounging on the sofa, watching TV and drinking beer without caring about the mess. He doesn't even acknowledge me when I arrive. Dinner isn't prepared, and I can't help but feel disappointed. Ignoring the mess, I go straight to the kitchen to start making dinner as usual. Then my mother-in-law pops her head out of her room and starts lecturing me, as if I'm the one to blame for everything. "You're back so late again. I'm starving. You're always talking about overtime and business trips, but you never take care of the house. You're not a good homemaker." My mother-in-law accuses me, using my late returns as an excuse to criticize my housework. She nitpicks at everything that bothers her and blames me for it all. In these situations, I've learned it's best to just leave her alone until she calms down. Arguing or defending myself only makes things worse. So I pretend to reflect on her words and focus on cooking. Her words hurt, but I endure it because I know she'll eventually quiet down. What's even harder to bear is how my husband seems to enjoy seeing me scolded by my mother-in-law. Women should appreciate their husbands. "You lack charm." My mother-in-law repeats her usual phrases. "That's right, isn't it?" My husband chimes in, mocking the situation. As I serve dinner, I feel anger bubbling up towards my mother-in-law. But it's my husband's behavior that annoys me the most. Despite my repeated requests for them to finish dinner on their own when I'm late, they never listen. Even when I start cooking, they just sit and wait for me to serve the food, as if I'm their personal maid. Our situation has deteriorated since my mother-in-law moved in with us. Before that, my husband used to help with the housework. We managed to raise our kids while both of us worked because of his help. When I was late, he'd make dinner, feed the kids, and take care of things. But now, he's changed. He stopped helping and started joining my mother-in-law in criticizing me. It's confusing and frustrating. My mother-in-law calls me lazy and incompetent, but she's the one who's dependent on us. She hasn't contributed anything towards expenses, even though she inherited money when her husband died. She wasted it on expensive things, ran out of money, and even got into debt. Now she's living with us, basically for free. It all started on the first day we lived together. My mother-in-law announced she'd be more considerate from now on. She bowed deeply, showing humility, but just 3 days later, she started criticizing me again for neglecting housework. At first, her sudden change amused me, but it quickly became serious. She implied I wasn't a good wife because I focused on my job too much. She didn't just complain about housework, she also criticized my job. I explained that I had to work late sometimes, but she didn't listen. Instead, she suggested I take a part-time job at a nearby supermarket. She had her idea of what a daughter-in-law should be, but she didn't understand my job at all. Living with her was a headache. If she didn't like something, like our meal choices, she'd complain. Even simple things like breakfast became a problem. We used to eat bread or buy lunch, but she didn't like that. Now, she reluctantly follows our rules, but she grumbles about it. Dinner is the biggest issue. She insists on dinner at 6 p.m. with at least 3 side dishes, and everyone must eat together. She says that's what a normal family does. But my job often keeps me past 6 p.m., and quitting isn't an option because it would hurt our finances. Is it because John's salary isn't enough? My mother-in-law accuses, refusing to believe that I work to support our family. When I look to my husband for support, he just brushes it off, saying I'll eventually learn my lesson. He doesn't defend me, which only adds to my frustration. My husband seems to enjoy playing the role of the understanding and tolerant husband who can't do housework. This annoys me even more. When we first moved in with my mother-in-law, he took her side instead of mine, which was disappointing. Since then, they've both treated me unfairly, as if they're teaming up against me. Whenever I try to get my husband to help with housework, my mother-in-law stops me, saying it's the wife's job. My husband doesn't stand up for me or try to stop her, even though we used to get along well. Now I wonder why things have changed. But then I realize something. My husband smirks every time my mother-in-law criticizes me. Maybe he has a problem with the fact that I earn more than him. He probably doesn't want to do housework either, but he can't complain because he's supposed to be the provider. I think he's been enjoying this situation all along. When my mother-in-law moved in, she often scolded me, questioning if John was the head of the family. It seemed to give him some sort of satisfaction to see me getting yelled at. It made me realize how narrow-minded my husband, whom I had been with for so long, truly was. After that, I spent days worrying about what to do. My mother-in-law was still causing a fuss, and my husband wasn't reliable. But back in the quiet days before my mother-in-law arrived, I lacked the courage to make any decisions. One day, while I was out shopping, a neighbor called out to me and made an unexpected comment. She said I should be more considerate of my mother-in-law. I was surprised and asked her what she meant. She said she didn't particularly like her own mother-in-law, but she didn't think she was being inconsiderate. Then she dropped a bombshell. She had heard about me from my mother-in-law. According to her, I didn't do any housework. The house was always dirty and messy. The laundry piled up. My mother-in-law's rheumatism got worse because she couldn't do chores. And her son came home late from work. It was shocking to hear how I was being portrayed. I don't do anything, and that's why we only eat bread for every meal. My mother-in-law has been crying and complaining about this situation. Lately, I've noticed that people in the neighborhood aren't reacting warmly to me. It dawned on me that it's because of the lies my mother-in-law has been spreading. My small, frail mother-in-law knows how to get sympathy from others. She's probably portraying herself as a suffering mother-in-law dealing with a lazy daughter-in-law who doesn't do any housework. The neighbor looked at me with cold, accusing eyes, and I felt ashamed that our family issues were spreading to the neighborhood. I don't think that's true. I mumbled and quickly went back home. When I walked into the living room, my mother-in-law was watching TV and munching on snacks. "Please stop spreading rumors," I said firmly as I hurried home. My mother-in-law laughed and admitted, "But it's true." I couldn't take it anymore. Something inside me snapped. If she wanted to believe her lies, then fine. From that moment on, I stopped doing any household chores. The next day, when I got home from work, my mother-in-law was yelling as usual, demanding dinner. Ignoring my husband and mother-in-law's remarks, I grabbed a cup of instant ramen noodles from my stash and only made enough for myself. My mother-in-law, seeing this, turned red and continued to yell. "So now you're proving you're the worst daughter-in-law who doesn't do any housework, huh? Fine, if that's how you want to be." As I calmly slurped my noodles, my mother-in-law couldn't come up with a response. She turned to my husband, crying for support. When he finally approached me, I explained what had happened. "Mom's been telling everyone I'm a terrible daughter-in-law who doesn't do any housework." When I asked her to stop, she insisted it was true. So I've decided to stop doing any chores. I'll do exactly what she's been telling everyone. I recounted yesterday's events to my husband. He tried to calm me down, looking troubled. "Mom probably exaggerated things. Don't be so stubborn." Even though my own mother-in-law was bad-mouthing me and it was her fault, my husband still took her side. I didn't even have the energy to argue. I threw the empty cup noodles away, ignored my husband, and went straight to the bathroom. I did my laundry and took a bath alone. As I soaked in the tub, I felt a sense of relief. I should have done this from the beginning. It didn't matter if I did housework or not. I was always labeled a bad wife anyway. From then on, I stopped doing anything. My mother-in-law complained about the lack of breakfast bread. On my day off, when I woke up and went to the living room, she ordered me to go buy bread immediately. "Why don't you go buy it yourself? I'm a bad wife, so I'll only buy my own share. And from now on, either pay for your food or take care of it yourself," I told her, ignoring her. I made myself coffee and ate my own bread, quickly finishing my meal. Seeing my mother-in-law's reaction, I worried I might have been too harsh. But given everything I'd endured, it felt like the least I could do. Afterwards, I only tidied up my own space in the crowded living room and settled down to read a book. Suddenly, the doorbell rang. Looking at the monitor, I saw more than 5 elderly people, all familiar faces, looking clearly angry. Confused, I watched as my mother-in-law hurried to open the door. The elderly people lined up outside started coming in one by one. I was stunned when one of them suddenly yelled at me. "I hear you're the wicked woman who doesn't even prepare meals for her own mother-in-law." These elderly people were my mother-in-law's siblings and her spouses. She had told them a false story about how she was mistreated by me, her daughter-in-law. She claimed I didn't feed her properly or let her take a bath, and she asked for their help. My mother-in-law is the youngest of 5 siblings, with 4 older brothers and sisters. With their spouses included, there were 9 elderly people accusing me of being a demon wife who deserved punishment. Being criticized by so many people made me break out in cold sweat from fear. "This is a misunderstanding." I finally managed to argue back, my voice trembling. But then my mother-in-law's eldest brother raised his voice. "Stop making excuses," he shouted, banging the floor with his cane. The others joined in, demanding I apologize and reflect on my actions. My husband arrived after hearing the commotion. My mother-in-law's brother turned to him and criticized my upbringing. My husband didn't defend me. Instead, he criticized me too. He only cared about himself, not me. Any affection I had for him disappeared at that moment. I used to think my husband was kind until we started living with my mother-in-law. But he's not kind, he's just weak, unable to stand up to pressure. He's easily swayed by the opinions of others. One of my mother-in-law's brothers took my husband's words seriously and suggested we divorce. Everyone agreed. My mother-in-law said they might give me another chance if I promised to change and serve her and my husband better in the future. Holding back tears, her siblings told me to be grateful, saying I wouldn't find a kinder mother-in-law anywhere else. They decided they'd take turns each week to check if I was doing the chores and serving my mother-in-law and husband. Once the conversation was over, everyone seemed satisfied. They planned to go out for sushi since they were all together for the first time in a while, and they all left the house. As they left, my mother-in-law made a parting shot, saying the house should be clean and laundry done by the time they got back. Why did it have to come to this? Alone in the messy living room, tears started to well up. We used to be happily married until my mother-in-law moved in. Why am I being complained about by all the relatives despite doing my best? Tears streamed down my face, a mix of sadness, regret, and anger. After a few hours, my husband and mother-in-law returned home. I was still sitting in the messy living room. My mother-in-law smirked and sneered. "Leave. We don't need a wife who doesn't do housework. I told you to clean up earlier, didn't I?" Seemingly tipsy, my mother-in-law ordered me to leave immediately. My husband joined in, his face grinning, thinking this would make me obey quietly. But I had no desire to keep working hard for them, or to do anything for them anymore. "Fine, I'll leave then," I said calmly and got up to leave the living room. Behind me, I heard my mother-in-law and husband laughing, thinking I was bluffing. I didn't care anymore about their reaction. I packed my things in my room and left the house without saying another word to them. About 2 weeks later, my mother-in-law called me. "John says he has no money." "What does that mean?" She seemed frantic. I told her the truth. "John earns only a third of what I do. I've been covering our expenses with my salary, and the house is in my name, so please leave soon." "I'm going to sell it," I urged her, but she insisted it was a joke. I told her to check the bank book in her drawer to see for herself. On the other end of the phone, my mother-in-law fell silent, seemingly shocked by my husband's low salary. Then she started to panic, begging me to come back because she was sorry and my husband was lonely. But I had made up my mind to divorce my husband. I told her I would handle everything through a lawyer and hung up the phone, ignoring her tearful apologies. Later, with the help of a lawyer, I filed for divorce, citing the actions of my mother-in-law and husband as the reason. The divorce was granted, and I felt relieved. I even received a small consolation payment. When I told my children about the divorce and what had happened, they supported me, agreeing that it was my husband and mother-in-law's fault. After that, I sold the house, and my husband and mother-in-law moved out. They had to stay with relatives temporarily since they had lost their home. As a result, my mother-in-law's lies were exposed, and it seems that my husband and mother-in-law were rejected by their relatives. I've heard they are now living in a small apartment together, struggling due to my husband's low salary. They spend their days blaming each other for my departure. My husband frequently messages me, asking for reconciliation now that he's cut ties with his mother. However, I'm considering blocking him soon because it's becoming bothersome. Without their nagging, I feel free. I plan to live my life gracefully from now on, focusing on myself,